Welcome to the Uncarved Block. Don't you just love my headphones? They give me personality. I don't know. Should I replace them? These are just some cheap things I found laying around. It's just not something I wish to spend money on right now. Today, we are going to be looking at a debate made by Jimbob and Planet Peterson on evolution. So, evolution isn't, at least defending evolution is not one of my strongest fields of study. But one thing I do want to say is some theists, especially conservative Christians, act like evolution hasn't met its burden of proof. Evolution has went beyond meeting its burden of proof. And what I mean by this is, for one thing, the science has been done. It's been accepted by the vast majority of scientists. And in fact, there are very few scientists that do not have religious motivations for denying evolution. And there are even, there are Christians that accept, evolution. So it's not necessarily something that goes against all religious positions. It's also accepted by other countries, other religions, or people that practice other religions. So this is, I really don't understand the purpose of debating evolution. You could question evolution, you could challenge it. That's science should be challenged. But to deny evolution without your own research and just using essentially philosophical arguments against it will not succeed, in my opinion. You got to do the work. You got to submit to peer review. And that hasn't been done. And until it is, evolution has met its burden of proof. So let's get started on this. I'll probably just do the intros. I think this was just a debate between the two of them. I don't know that there's a moderator. And things tend to go off the rails, especially when there's not a moderator. So we'll see how it goes. Oops, my bad. So I was queuing this up because there was a lot of dead space between when the debate actually begins, and this was actually held. This is from Jimbob's channel, the video, but the debate was actually held on the politics Discord server ran by some guy named Taco. So anyway, so he'll be the one speaking at the beginning, introducing, and we will just see most of it from Jimbob's view. So there we go.
All right. Everyone, thank you so much for being here today. We're having two internet debate titans, Planet Peterson and Made by Jimbob, here today to debate the topic, is evolution a scientific theory? This debate is... Sorry, I hit a double up on the noise there. So we have a pretty easy to follow format here. We're going to do an affirmative introduction, 5 minutes. Planet Peter's taking the affirmative on the question, is evolution a scientific theory? And then on the negative side, we have Made by Jimbob, who's saying, no, it's not a scientific theory. After the 5-minute introductions, we're going to do a cross-examination on both sides. That should be about 30 minutes on both sides. They are welcome to end their cross-examination early if they like. And then the audience question portion will be after we do both cross-examinations. That should be 20 to 30 minutes. In my YouTube, I have a button that you can press that says ask questions for the debaters here. It doesn't cost you anything. It's just a button you can press and plug in your question, and I'll ask all the fair questions. Don't put anything crazy in there, guys. And then on the closings, those will happen after the audience questions. Those should be about 5 minutes each on both sides. Once again, they can give up the remainder of their time if they don't really need more. The rules in this debate are going to be very simple. So do your best to stay on the main topic. Is evolution a scientific theory? The goal of Planet Peterson is going to be to prove that evolution is a scientific theory, and the goal made by Jimbob is going to be to prove that evolution is not a scientific theory. There's not going to be over talking during the introductions and closing statements at all. So please, during the introductions and closing statements, allow them to make their statements, right? During the cross examination, either debater can take back their time if they feel like it's going off into the weeds. I'm not saying they're going to get extra time, but it's just they're allowed to say, hey, let's go back to the topic if they feel like it's going off topic. If the person who has time in cross-examination asks a question, please try to address the question directly and answer the question. Just do your best there. The person whose turn it is on cross-examination is the one asking questions. So please don't go start asking a bunch of questions during the cross-examination. If it's not your turn on the cross-examination, you both have 30 minutes for that. Just keep the over talking on that to a minimum. And if you have to interject, just please do it in a polite way. Just say, hey, may I jump in or something like that, right? With that being said, if interruptions or over talking are constant, moderation abilities may be used to protect either the affirmative or the negative time. So I'm here to help out both Peterson and Jimbob, right? I'm not trying to take sides here. I'm going to do my best to be an unbiased moderator in this debate. Do either of you have any questions before we get started here? Are y'all ready to rock and roll? Cool. I'm going to start my timer right now. Eric, you have the initial 5 minutes. It's starting now.
All right. So thankfully, they are having the cross examinations, the controlled by one person at a time. As I said before, not a big fan of the just bickering back and forth for an hour. I'd rather it be controlled bickering. Again, this is really, I mean, who decides whether something is a scientific theory or not? I don't know Planet Peterson's expertise. I don't think Jimbob has any expertise. I think they're just like me, just someone interested in these topics. Excuse me. But if you type that in, is evolution a scientific theory? Of course, you get the AI response. National Institutes of Health. Oh, but that's the government. National Library of Medicine. Evolution is both a fact and a theory, widely observable in laboratory and natural populations as they change over time. Flu vaccines are an example. Evolution is a population concept. An individual does not evolve, only populations evolve in the face of genetic changes. Mutation, migration, natural selection, and genetic drift are evolutionary forces. On the other hand, evolutionary theory explains more than just those facts that we can routinely observe. This makes it a theory, but is it just a theory? In lay language, theory means a guess. But in academia, it is the utmost position an idea may reach in science. Who else do we have? Science Museum. One of the most impactful concepts in modern science. The scientific theory of evolution is central to the Science Museum of Minnesota's work. Let's see. One good website is Talk Origins, which used to be one of the premier websites in the early days of the internet as far as these debates went. So Stephen Jay Gould, evolution is a theory and a fact. Gould is stating the prevailing view of the scientific community. Evolution is a process that has always gone on in the history of Earth, can be doubted only by those who are ignorant of the evidence or are resistant to evidence, owing to emotional blocks or plain bigotry. Can you be a bigot toward a theory? There are no alternatives to evolution as history that can withstand critical examinations. Theodore Dobzhansky. It is time for students of the evolutionary process, especially those who have been misquoted and used by creationists, to state clearly that evolution is a fact, not theory, and that what is at issue within biology are questions of details on the process. It is a fact that major life forms. So it seems this guy is placing fact over theory. Who is this? R.C. Lewontin. Today, nearly all biologists acknowledge evolution as a fact. The term theory is no longer appropriate except when referring to various models that explain how life evolves. Again, seem to be placing fact over theory. A few words need to be said about the theory of evolution from Douglas Futuyama, which most people take to mean the proposition that organism has evolved from common ancestors. In everyday speech and science, theory means a statement of what are held to be the general laws, principles, or causes of something's known or observed. The theory of evolution is a body of interconnected statements about natural selection and other processes that are thought to cause evolution, just as the atomic theory of chemistry and the Newtonian theory of mechanics of bodies of statements that describe causes of physical and chemical phenomena. So it's just a strange debate topic to me. But anyway, there you have it. We'll see where they go. Yeah, I'm going to switch to Breakfast Tacos broadcast of this because Jimbob started listening to the opening by playing Peterson, and Jimbob started playing sentimental music, and that's just disrespectful to your opponent. So, gonna switch.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks, Jimbob, as well, and everybody that came to see. So, I find this topic to be very odd and confusing. I view this the same way I view the current conversation going around, is it the Gulf of Mexico or the Gulf of America? I mean, one person says one thing, and then the entire rest of the world says otherwise. In science, a theory, it's not a guess, it's not speculation, it's a comprehensive, well-substantiated explanation of natural phenomena. It's based on a vast body of evidence, experiments, repeated testing. It's an enormous series of different hypotheses that all converge toward kind of like a unifying framework or a unifying description of reality. That's what theories are. Other scientific theories like germ theory, relativity, they explain how and why things happen in the natural world. And these are taken for granted by virtually everybody except flat earthers. And then creationist types, they pick and choose certain theories that they want to throw out, but at least they're not flat earthers, right? The awkwardness there is that they typically are engaging in the exact same kind of logic and rhetoric that flat earthers are. But we accept scientific theories because they've, again, been tested countless times and they've passed those tests. And evolution fits this description perfectly. It's supported by multiple independent lines of evidence, including evidence across different disciplines like geology and, well, geology's the main one, I suppose. But anyways, we have the fossil record, we have genetics, we have comparative anatomy, we have embryology, and we have much more. And going back to the spirit of how science is done and how scientific theories develop, evolution does make testable predictions. For example, scientists predicted the existence of transitional fossils like Tiktaalik before they were discovered. And it was discovered in a place it was expected to be found, and in a timeline it was expected to be found. That's where physics and geology overlaps and confirms ideas that the evolutionary science proposes. Genetic research, that's also repeatedly confirmed evolutionary relationships that were originally inferred from anatomy and these sort of classification. Is it an exact science? Is it subjective? Is it objective? That's a secondary debate, but there were all these predictions that were made hundreds of years ago for the most part. And evolution, when we learned how to do genetics, it passed all those tests with flying colors. So to claim that evolution isn't a theory, I don't get it. I don't understand how the methodology fundamentally differs in evolution from any other kind of scientific theory. So I don't know what we're going to see today. I really hope that we're not going to hear arguments about how, since evolution occurred in the past, we weren't there to see it, therefore it can't be science. I mean, this is like the equivalent of arguing that the sun used to orbit the Earth, or that the Earth used to orbit the sun in a different direction. And no modern science can say otherwise because you weren't there. Like, we need a witness. I also hope that we're not going to hear arguments that have nothing to do with evolution, but instead are philosophical ideas about knowledge and reality. That would be a little bit unfortunate, but it also has literally nothing to do with evolution. So if Jimbob believes that there are scientific theories, then what I think he needs to do is tell us about the methodological approach to evolution and how it fundamentally differs from any other kind of scientific theory. And arguments such as, under evolution, you don't decide what facts are true, so you can't decide what to believe or anything. That's a complete non-starter. That's the case with any kind of science. That's the case with atomic theory. But I don't think that Jimbob believes that somebody who believes atoms exist can't know anything, because if atomic theory is true, then that means blank. You can believe in other things as well as, evolution. So I'm not going to entertain that diversion. I'm not stupid enough to fall for it. So that's my opening statement.
Perfect.
I think this was an okay opening. I couldn't tell if he was reading. I don't think he was. I think he was improvising this whole thing. I could be wrong. But I would always want to write out my opening just so that I have everything. I think it would have been much stronger if he would have buttressed this with comments from actual scientists concerning whether or not evolution is a theory and a fact. But it was an okay opening. I do like that he outlined what he thinks his opponent needs to do. And he is correct that philosophy is not the way to approach this, because, as Graham Oppie said, philosophy gets better by becoming something else. The science comes from philosophy, and it eventually broke off because it became something else. So let's see how Jimbob does.
There are 20 seconds remaining. We'll go ahead and reset this.
And this is my cat.
Oh, nice. Jimbob, I'm resetting this now. Go ahead and do your intro whenever you're ready.
Okay, thank you, Breakfast Tacos, and Eric for coming to the debate and organizing it, Breakfast Tacos. Okay, scientific theory is a likely explanation of what causes an observable natural phenomenon based on an experiment using the scientific method. The scientific method goes as follows. Observation, question is what causes Y phenomenon. Hypothesis is I think X causes Y phenomenon. Experiment, introduce X, remove X, repeat, draw a conclusion, and develop a scientific theory at the tail end of that process. The only arbiter for two competing hypotheses in natural science is an experiment. Evolution is claimed to be a scientific theory in natural science. So what is evolution? Roughly speaking, the process by which different kinds of living organisms are thought to have developed and diversified from early forms during the history of the Earth. The observation in this statement is variation of organisms. The assumed cause, I'm going to let my opponent tell us what he thinks that is. My argument today is pretty simple. Premise 1, a scientific theory is the product of the scientific method. Premise 2, evolution cannot be run through the scientific method. Conclusion, evolution is not a valid scientific theory. There's a famous mathematician and astronomer who said the following in regards to astronomy, which I also think applies to evolution. He said, as far as hypotheses is concerned, let no one expect anything certain from astronomy which cannot furnish it, lest he accept as the truth ideas conceived for another purpose, and depart from this study a greater fool than when he entered. The reason I find this comparable is the inaccessibility of introducing viable hypotheses out there in space is similar to evolution's inability to test viable hypotheses in the grand scheme of time itself, which it requires. This essentially is the argument against evolution being a proper scientific theory. Evolution cannot produce a viable hypothesis which can be taken through the scientific method. Scientific theories are the product of the scientific method. They are not the beginning of the scientific method. So my opponent is tasked today with something that should be fairly simple from his view, which is to take evolution through the scientific method from observation to theory and every step in between. We can start right now, and I'll concede the rest of my time by giving my opponent the opportunity to present his observation.
Okay. So Jimbob has a high school understanding of science, and that's okay. I really do too. I only took a couple of science classes in college. But what's interesting about this is, and I found an article, I think it's over here, Sadler Science, right here. 5 reasons you should ditch the scientific method. Scientific method, do we need a new framework? Is it outdated in a ghost society? Took me a second to decide what to do here, because seems like one of the best resources was behind a paywall, so I couldn't get to it. However, what this scientific method does is think people, to people like Jimbob, that something has to be followed in this order and done this way, and if it's not done that way, then it's not a theory. So he's going to question whether or not evolution is a theory based on his perception of how science should be done. But as we can see from this AI overview, it's an oversimplification. It promotes science as a rigid linear process: observation, hypothesis, experiment, analysis, conclusion, which doesn't accurately reflect the messy, iterative, and often exploratory nature of real scientific research. Focus on experimentation. Some people think, well, we don't have what they think are adequate experiments with evolution, then that just eliminates evolution right there. Data-driven approaches, emphasis on knowledge over practice. But however, there are core principles, rigorous inquiry, critical thinking. It's a foundation for new approaches, and it's a foundation for scientific literature, which is why they teach it in high school to just so it's not outdated, but rather it's a framework that needs to be adapted to the changing landscape. So it's the core elements that are important, not the process itself. You can also go over here on Discover magazine. It's probably best to get the bad news out of the way first. The so-called scientific method is a myth. To squeeze a diverse set of practices that span cultural anthropology, paleobotany, and the theoretical physics into a handful of steps is an inevitable distortion, and to be blunt, displays a serious poverty of imagination. Also, I think, I was wondering, Jimbob seems to be quoting somebody at the beginning of his intro. Jimbob, if you were doing so, I wish you would have attributed it. Then you say you agree with one scientist. You should have named him as well. I think you are referring to Machao Kakou, whatever his name is. Because I was cutting off the back end with all the audience questions. I don't deal with those. This thing goes on for 4 hours, I think. But I think I caught you mentioning his name. And when you say that, you indicate, you imply that Michio Kaku said that about evolution, when in your intro you say it's about astronomy. So I don't think it's upon you to attribute that meaning to Michio Kaku as you do later. What is his name? Michio Kaku. There we are. Let's see. Does he say anything about evolution? Evolution of intelligence. Considers climate change and terrorism as serious threats to human evolution. Physics of extraterrestrial solutions, official website. So nothing really. Mankind has stopped evolving. Evolution of intelligence. So just from the evolution of intelligence in humanity, I would say Michio Kaku thinks that evolution is a acceptable scientific theory. So based on this, I do not think that Jimbob can say what Michio Kaku's statement about astronomy, if he said that, applies to evolution. So you might want to rethink that, Jimbob. Whoa!
Perfect. I'm turning this off real fast. So we'll begin the crosstalk then, or the cross-examination then?
Sure thing. So just to quickly comment on what you said at the end there, during a cross-examination, I'm not like producing, like I'm the one asking the questions. So I'm happy to do what you just said there, but that would have to.
That's fine. Yeah, I actually wasn't aware of that when I said that. But yeah.
That's fine. So I'm happy to do that, but you will ask me those questions during your cross-examination. Sure. That's how that'll go. Okay. Anyways, so cross-examination timer, that already start, Taco? Yeah, I'm ready. Okay. So Jimbob, is it your opinion that science is capable and pretty good at discovering accurate information regarding the natural world?
It's my opinion that the scientific method can produce high likelihoods of explanations for causal relations to phenomenons.
I agree. I mean, I would take that as a yes to my question. It doesn't deal in absolutes. Go ahead.
Can you repeat your question, and I'll delineate my answer, why my answer kind of reformats the question necessarily. Yeah.
Sure thing. Is it your opinion that science is capable and generally very good at discovering accurate information regarding the natural world?
I would say, no, the scientific method assumes accurate information, then it can do experiment. I would say science, the method, isn't actually required to ascertain accurate information of the world. For instance, I can go out and do proper taxonomy of trees and animals and things just by classification and identity, and be able to come to some good knowledge based on what things are. And so that's a description of what something is. I hold that the scientific method gives us an explanation of what causes a phenomenon we see.
Yeah, and do you think, so what you kind of said there was, well, there are other ways of ascertaining true knowledge. Like if I am hungry, I am not using scientific knowledge. I'm aware that I am hungry. You're wearing a red hat. I'm not using the scientific method so that was the first thing I kind of heard from you, and I totally agree. But what I'd like to know is, for example, you can't observe atoms, but we have a robust scientific framework that tells us that atoms exist and their properties of them. So I'm not talking specifically, I'm talking generically. I just use that as an example. So do you think that science is capable and very good at discovering accurate information about the natural world?
The scientific method, I would say, is not doing that, which is what's in question. If you're referring to science colloquially as a body of knowledge, then I would grant that. Specifically, I'm referring today to the scientific method.
Okay, so if this is like too much of a meta conversation, then that's fine. But what is it that you think the scientific method is not doing here, or is not good at, or is not capable of?
Making its way through. You mean in regards to evolution?
No, just in regards to the scientific method, because I'm asking just a generic question about the scientific method and being able to declare with confidence that these are true things about the natural world.
Got you. Yeah, scientific method doesn't produce truth claims, for one. It assumes truth claims. So we start with assumptions about the world. We assume that they're regular. We call them things. These are first order statements about the world. Scientific method is actually looking at a phenomenon in the world that's natural and asking a question of causality. And that's what the scientific method is. The scientific method doesn't actually produce truth statements. It produces likelihood statements about causality.
Yeah, but I'm pretty sure you're conceding that the scientific method is a good method that gets us to drawing conclusions about what we think is what we think are the best explanations for what's happening.
Yes, causally. Yeah, I agree with that. Causally, but not what something is, right? So the scientific method doesn't tell us what something is, right? We declare what something is and we properly categorize. And then we go, like for instance, the scientific method, if I watched, if me and you were on like a hike and we saw bubbling water out of the hot springs, right? You and I would both go, that's bubbling water, right?
I would hope so, yeah.
Yeah, but you wouldn't agree that we're doing science right there, right?
No, yeah, I talked about this already.
Okay, yeah, that's the distinction I'm making.
Okay, that's fine. My next question would be, which scientific ideas do you reject and why?
Scientific ideas? I'm not sure what you're referring to. What's a scientific idea? Like, give me an example of a scientific idea.
That the Earth is a sphere and orbits the sun, that evolution by natural selection occurs. We know that you disagree with that one, but I'm trying to figure out where else you may be coming from with regard to science and what it claims.
Again, I would reject the category. I would say descriptions of reality. I wouldn't call them scientific ideas.
So nobody directly observes that atoms exist. The only way I don't think you can really argue that we philosophized our way or we speculated our way into atoms existing. There were ideas about atoms going back a very long way to people like Democritus, but we never actually got to the point where we can say with confidence that they do exist and these are their properties until we were doing science.
Again, determining what something is and observing it, I would say what you just said is an observation of something at higher resolution, given the technology improved. So what you're really referring to is an observation. But in regards to theoretics and examining and how to properly frame what it is you're looking at, I believe both categorizing the natural world and describing it and doing science require some assumptions about philosophy, about what we're looking at. Given there's a philosophy of science, I think a philosophy precedes all descriptions as well, and I don't think that's too controversial.
So I'm trying to ask if there are scientific ideas you reject, and you kind of say that I reject that science has anything to say about what is or what is not true, but I would say
scientific method.
It supports like what is likely to be true. However, I'm pretty sure that there are all kinds of things you agree are true statements about the world that we couldn't know if it weren't for science. Like, for example, that radio waves exist, that atoms exist. So I feel like it's not exactly a contradiction, but I think I don't know. It doesn't seem coherent.
Eric, do you agree that there's a difference between describing something in the natural world and doing the scientific method?
Yeah, but the point I'm trying to make is we arrive there by doing the scientific method. There are some cases where we need the scientific method to be able to do that.
No, hold on a second. We need the scientific method. Okay, wait. So first, the question was, do you agree that there's a distinction between describing the natural world and doing the scientific method? You said yes. Then you said you need the scientific method to get there. Can you tell me where there is you're referring to?
To being able to make, make statements or have knowledge about the world.
No, I would say in order to make statements about the world, what you need is the assumption of the regularity of the world itself. You need minds, you need language, and you need descriptions. Mm-hmm. Math could be involved descriptively. Yes. And we agreed. If you and I were walking on a path and I pointed to bubbling water, you agreed that us both pointing to bubbling water is not doing the scientific method. So now it sounds like you're contradicting.
No, statement. Because I'll explain it again. There are some things, like the existence of radio waves, that kind of knowledge can only be revealed to us if we go through the scientific method, because it's not directly observable. I mean, the way we observed it was by doing science, but you need that specific framework in order to investigate it. So that's the issue I'm having with this.
Is there a difference?
I don't think science is how you do that, yet I think that there are many things you think are facts about the world that we couldn't know unless we went through the scientific method.
Yeah, well, again, you're assuming that scientific method produces facts in that statement, and it doesn't. So if we agree that it's a fact that there's bubbling water, and we both, without going into high-tier meta-philosophy, if we both agree there's bubbling water, that statement itself wasn't produced by the scientific method. So the question is, well, what can be produced as a likely explanation of that observation? I would look at you and say, Eric, what do you think causes that bubbling water? That question would lead us into the scientific method, and we can actually investigate what causes the bubbling water. But that there's bubbling water is not a question of the scientific method.
Yes, but that's just so not what I'm asking, and I don't really know how to
ask it again.
There are certain things about the natural world that I think require going through the scientific method in order to know them, because there are things that are not directly observable through our natural born senses, for example. So the scientific method is the process by which we accumulate that kind of knowledge. But I feel like you're just kind of rejecting that at the same time, because, well, yeah, but you need to assume certain things to do science. Yes, but that's not the point. And you have to have an observer and a mind to do. Yes, but that's not the point. The point is,
I try to rephrase what your question is for you?
Yeah, go ahead.
Are you asking me, are there certain facts we come to know that we couldn't know without the scientific method?
More or less, yeah.
Okay. Does the scientific method produce facts?
I would say it helps us discover the facts that are there.
Hold on. Let me do it again. If you're asking the question, Jimbob, are there facts about the world that you couldn't otherwise not know without the scientific method? And I asked you, does the scientific method produce facts? What is the answer, yes or no?
The answer is, I would say no, but I would say more so like not exactly.
So that means your question has to be malformed, because in your question, it assumes that the scientific method could produce facts, right?
No, because I've been saying that there are things we only come to know by doing the scientific method.
Okay, when you say things we come to know, are you referring to facts?
You could call them this. Here, I gotta reclaim my time. I gotta reclaim my time here. We're at 11 and a half minutes, and we haven't talked about evolution yet, because I'm just trying to understand like how we approach collecting information through science. I don't want to have a meta narrative about philosophical stuff, so I'm just going to use my time to try to get back on track here. Which means I probably don't want to ask question number 3, but maybe we'll get to it. So, Jimbob, if evolution was true, what would the evidence look like?
If evolution was a scientific theory, that's what's in question. It wouldn't, if it were true, it wouldn't be a theory because theories aren't true. Theories are likely explanations of causal relationships between variables and phenomenon. So again, your question.
Sort of. So where were we? What is a scientific theory? Okay, let's make sure I was in the right spot because it didn't take me there. Scientific theory is a structured explanation to explain not only phenomena, but a group of facts in the natural world that often, not always, Jimbob, incorporates a scientific hypothesis and scientific laws. Why is evolution a fact and a theory? This is from the National Center for Science Education. Evolutionary biology is a strong and vigorous field of science. A theoretical framework that encompasses several basic mechanisms is consistent with the patterns seen in nature. And there is abundant evidence demonstrating the action of these mechanisms as well as their contributions to nature. Hence, evolution is both a theory and a set of established facts that the theory explains. Like every other science, there is scientific debate about some aspects of evolution, but none of these dates appear to shake the foundations of this field. There exists no other scientific explanation that can account for all the patterns in nature, only scientific explanations that require a miraculous force, like a creator. Such supernatural explanations lie outside of science, which can neither prove nor disprove miracles. Science provides us with a compelling account and explanation of the changing life on Earth. It should also remind us of our good fortune to have come into being and our great responsibility to ensure the continuity of life. So, Jimbob is wrong in that evolution is not a fact. It is a fact. Sorry. Woo!
And
That's what we mean by true.
Well, no, because
yes,
things that we call facts, for instance, that heat goes from hot to cold, right? We call that a fact, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Heat goes from hot to cold. Pressure goes from high to low. Okay, these are things we call true facts. We call them lawful. Science doesn't come to a theory and it never calls it true, or otherwise it would be a law.
No.
Yes. Are scientific theories true? Yes or no?
They are true. They are true descriptions about the world. I know that you think this because you think atoms exist, and it's called atomic theory.
No, hold on. Are scientific theories descriptions about the world?
Jimbob, you're not cross-examining me here. So,
well, I'm clarifying because you're misinterpreting two things. Your question assumes that the scientific method, for one, produces theories, which is true, but to call theories true is a mistake. Theories aren't true. They're inductive conclusions about causality, explanation, not descriptions. So there's a difference between descriptions and
that's how we understand. That is very much in the common sense of how people understand statement, like truthness about statements.
Okay.
So anyways, I'm just going to ask the same question again. If evolution did happen, and by the way, that evolution occurs, it kind of is a law because we always observe genetic changes in every single generation, but we won't get bogged down with that. But if evolution did occur, what would the evidence look like?
And can you define what evolution is to know that it occurred for me?
Well, you could, in one sense, say any change in allele frequencies over generations, but the grand question with evolution is that all life on this planet is the descendant of a common ancestor. You can narrow it down more and just say these selective groups of organisms have a particular common ancestor that doesn't go all the way back to the the earliest life on our planet, but only goes
Mhm.
back so many thousands, millions years or whatever.
Gotcha. Okay, so because the debate topic isn't whether or not I think evolution is true, the debate topic is whether or not evolution is a scientific theory. And so if you're
Mhm.
asking me if evolution was a scientific theory, what would it look like to you? What would
No, I'm
convince you
just
that it was a
asking
scientific
that if
theory?
evolution happened, what would the evidence look like?
If evolution occurred in the grand scheme of things, I actually have no idea what it would look like because I'm not sure what you're claiming is causing why the phenomenon. So, if someone said, there's a scientific theory I have that this process occurred and produced this observation we call diversity in life, I'm going to ask a question. Interesting. Can you isolate what you think is causing the diversity of life such that you can run it
You
through?
can save that for your cross examination.
Well, that's what
My
I'm
next
saying. It's like
question-
your question has nothing to do with the scientific method.
I would
You're
disagree.
asking a philosophical
We're trying
question.
no, we're trying to get
I thought you
there.
didn't want to do philosophy.
We're not. So I'm confused as to if you don't even know how to delineate the data that would say these evolutionary ideas are true or false. Why is it that you're claiming that evolution is not a scientific theory? And I know you also don't believe in evolution either. So why either of those things?
The topic of the debate is whether or not evolution is a scientific theory. The question of
Yes.
what
And you don't know what
I'm
kind of
answering
data
it.
that theory would produce.
Data. I'm not
So
interested in
I'm
data because the scientific method
Jimbob,
is more
stop,
than
please.
data.
So you don't know what the data that would be produced by that body of knowledge that is the scientific theory would even be. So I'm curious as to why you think that it's not, when you seem to be ignorant about how you would even ascertain whether or not it is.
Well, because if you say if evolution was true, what do you think it would look like? What would the evidence look like? I'm asking, what are you claiming is actually occurring, such that I'm asking myself the question: did this happen? This is a question of
I know that you know
causality, right?
what evolution is. I'm not gonna spell it out here for you. A scientific theory is going to consist of a very large body of knowledge that's been collected by going through the scientific method. There's no way that you disagree with that. So,
Yep.
if evolution was true, what would that body of knowledge within the theory look like?
It would look like starting with an observation and taking evolution down the scientific method steps and arriving at a theory. That's what it would look like for me. That's why we're here debating it.
So that's Jimbob's problem. He says, for me. Well, okay. Why should we care about your opinion over those of the multitude of scientists that say, yes, this is a robust theory. It's established. It's done. We've met our burden of proof. Because Jimbob has a high school understanding of science. And he is possessing that rigid thinking that article mentioned. So, Jimbob, you can't expect people to do science your way. You have to go to the scientist and say, how do you do science?
You're describing the process, not what is the data that would either confirm this idea or allow us to be able to throw this idea out. I need to know what the data would be.
We don't confirm scientific theories with data. We confirm them with
we
experiments.
Absolutely do.
Oh, we confirm what is it that
what is
Lesai. Again, also a scientific moron myself. But why is this so hard for people to do Google searches? So here's the AI overview. Do we confirm scientific theories with data? I asked. Yes, they are confirmed or refined through the process of gathering data. Scientific theories are well-established explanations. The role of data in the form of observations and experimental results is crucial. So even within Jimbob's rigid structure of the scientific method, observations are data and experimental results are data. So yes, right there in the scientific explanation, you confirm theories with data. I'll look down here. The theory of evolution is supported vast amount of data from various fields, including genetics, paleontology, and comparative anatomy. The theory of gravity is supported by observations of planetary orbits and the behavior of objects in a gravitational field. Verification, the use of empirical data. Philosophers introduced several concepts and theories on the basis of which to analyze logical and inferential relations between empirical data and scientific hypotheses, including observation, falsifiability, confirmation, and experimental method. One of the most important consequences of this extended and complex debate is the conclusion that theories cannot be verified, but they can be confirmed, warranted, or falsified. What else we have down here? Wikipedia. That's where I was, University of Michigan. Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. Investigations of how empirical data are generated, analyzed, and used in practice. But if all observations and empirical data are theory-laden, how can they provide reality-based, objective epistemic constraints on scientific reasoning? Data. The naive fantasy that data have an immediate relation to phenomena of this world, that they are objective in some strong ontological sense. Let's just get into philosophy. Traditional empiricism. Such experimental data might be conceived as being sensations, perceptions, or similar phenomena. So anyway, but yeah, even within the scientific method, data confirms a theory. University of California, Berkeley. Are we loading? Theories change. It usually involves interpreting existing data in new ways. Process of theory change often involves true scientific controversy, disagreements over how data should be interpreted. So I don't know where Jimbob's getting this, but he doesn't get it from science.
That the experiments give us to be able to draw conclusions.
Fair enough, but I'm not just looking at data without an experiment. So take us through the scientific method.
No, again, that was part of like what you want me to be able to do for this, but that's not, you don't get to tell me what I do during my cross-examination. I'm more than happy to do that when it's your turn. So I'm just going to ask the exact same question again.
I'm asking for the data.
I'm going to
the tail end of the scientific method. That's what I'm asking for.
Jimbob seems to be a hard time accepting that this is Planet Peterson's time. Let's see if Planet Peterson does the same.
If you give me the data at the end of the scientific method, I will then interact with it.
You can ask that in the crosstalk portion that you're in charge of, Jimbob.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So I'll ask it one more time, and then I think I know maybe a different direction we can go. If evolution was a scientific theory, then it would possess a collective body of knowledge that supports the theory. What kind of knowledge would the evolutionary theory contain within it?
What kind of knowledge would the scientific...
What sorts of data would confirm evolution and be part of its theory?
What types of data it would include is introduced causal mechanism that produces the phenomenon that's observed. It would include that data.
Okay, so I guess that's what we're going to have to go with. I don't really understand. Do you agree or disagree that if evolution is true, then it would mean that all life on the planet is related?
If the theory of evolution were true, then assuming that organisms are related still doesn't give you the process of speciation as some sort of mechanistic
That's fine.
causal thing.
That's fine. That's not required to know that organisms are related or to be able to test whether or not they are related. But it's very clearly an implication of evolutionary theory that all organisms on this planet would be related.
If you're just saying all life has similar chemistry observably, and all life is bound to similar laws of physics and chemistry,
That's
you could
nowhere close to where I'm going with this.
Well, I'm saying relatedness. Like I'm just saying, like from
I'm
your
talking
view,
about genetics. I'm talking about Darwin proposed that there must be a hereditary molecule, and that would be passed down from organism to organism. And that is what is responsible for the traits that organisms have. And the modification of that genetic molecule is what would cause variations in populations. And so it would change over time. Then he had ideas about what it could be. He called them gemmucules or something like that. We know he was wrong, but we now know about genetics. And so anyways, go ahead.
So
which would be data that confirms at least the basis of Darwin's theory. So Jimbob has just been proven wrong, and I'm not so sure that he gets it. Okay, well, I'm cutting Peterson's cross-examination because, one, this video is running long already, and two, there was a lot of Jimbob still trying to take control back, and Peterson saying, no, Jimbob, it's my turn to cross-examine. So we'll just get to Jimbob's actual cross-examination.
Okay. Starting now?
Eric. Yes. In evolution, in the evolutionary theory, what's the observation?
There are like countless different kinds of observations you could make for evolution.
The best one that you think supports that it's a theory, the best observation you got.
The fossil record and genetics.
Okay, I observed a fossil or a collection of fossil, right? So the observation is fossils, plural, okay? Is the question what causes fossils, plural?
What?
I'm asking you, if you found fossils, what's the observation?
Really quick, we don't, so the fossil record was used to build support for evolution, but then there are fossils that were predicted to be out there that we then found. So the fossils are not just observations, and then we form a theory around the observation.
Excuse me, hold on a second.
Hold on a second. The evidence that was predicted as well.
Stop for a second. You just said we use fossils to support the theory. You didn't even get to the theory because you need an observation to get to the theory first. So you're starting with the theory and then you're finding fossils. You have to do it the proper scientific way, which is start with an observation. You don't assume the theory because you didn't get there yet. You have to start with the observation, not tie an observation to your assumed theory. This is not science. This is pseudoscience. So again, if you're going to claim that you found fossils, is there something specific about the fossils you're calling your observation?
Yeah, the characteristics of the fossils. So, for example, Archaeopteryx was predicted to have existed before its fossil was ever found. It should have intermediate traits between theropod dinosaurs and birds, and it does.
Okay, hold on. Again, you're telling a story about the observation. In science, you start with an observation, just purely, and describe it, okay? So what are you purely observing with fossils, please? Very clearly.
The anatomical structure is the most obvious thing you can observe with fossils. And then by observing the anatomical structure of modern living birds and extinct theropod dinosaurs, the prediction that an intermediate fossil form should exist was made. And
hold on. We're not talking about predictions. We're starting with the scientific method. This should be very easy for you. Now focus. The observation is the fossil exists and it shows the phenotype, the anatomy of a certain bird-like creature, and you're comparing that to an observation you have presently with an anatomical similar bird-like creature, correct? That's the observation.
No, I said theropod dinosaurs and modern birds. So what was... Go ahead.
I'm just saying, In clear language, you're discovering a fossil and you're looking at its anatomy and you're comparing it to modern anatomy, right? In short, that's your observation.
Yes, because what evolution tells us is that the organisms of today are the descendants of organisms of the past.
Stop going to the theory. I'm asking. Stop it. I'm asking you.
I'm telling you the scientific steps.
You can't interpret the observation with the theory because the theory is at the tail end of the theory. You have to pretend you don't know what the theory is.
I'm talking. Archaeopteryx was discovered only a few years after On the Origin of Species was published.
I don't care about the story.
Evolution was very much hypothetical at the time, and I'm telling you what happened when it was.
You can't even get to the. We can't even get past observation.
For the modern
Let me ask you. No, stop your story. Stop the filibustering storytelling. I don't care about your stories. Observation. There is a fossil that has an anatomy. There is a current animal today that has similar anatomy, right? All I'm asking you is that the observation?
That's one of the observations. Yeah.
Okay, let's start with that. Thank you. That was really hard. Observation. Old thing has traits, typical traits, anatomy. Current thing has similar things, right? The next question in the scientific method is, what causes the similarity, right? That's your question?
I never asked a question. What are you talking about?
I know, because you didn't do the scientific method. Thank you. So the next question in the scientific method, Peterson, is you start with the observation, and now you're asking a question about the observation in nature, the similarities between these two things. So isn't the question what causes the similarities between these things?
Yeah, and then that would be genetics, which was discovered farther down the road.
Hold on a second. If the question is what causes this phenomenon you call similarity in traits or anatomy, right? Your hypothesis is now this. What causes similarity, correct?
A hypothesis is not a question.
I didn't say it was. We already
asked
the question.
Yes, you did. You said your hypothesis is what causes similarity.
Dude, holy shit. Your observation
That's what you said.
Dude, the hypothesis is the question is what causes this phenomenon, right? The hypothesis is positing X causes Y, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So what is X in this scientific method? We got to the observation, we asked the question, what causes the similarities, right? You have fossils, and that's your observation, right? A fossil and the current bird that you're referring to. Hypothesis is X causes Y. So what is X?
You could say common descent. You could also say genetics.
Question big. Isn't common descent to the theory itself?
It's an implication of the theory, yes, but we would look at any
common descent is a post-diction basically story of what is occurring. We're asking for something that's X that you could introduce to produce similarities between these two things, right? The phenomenon is similarities in phenotype, right? So now we're asking a question, what causes similarities in phenotype? And you've skipped to common descent, which you can't introduce into an experiment. You can't introduce common descent and remove it. This is not science.
What? We do evolutionary experiments all the time.
I didn't ask if you think we do evolutionary experiments all the time. I don't think
we do. We do.
I don't care what you think we do. Right now,
I don't think that we do. We do. I can cite.
I don't care if we do. Right now, we're supposed to be doing one right now, dude. And the observation is similarity in phenotype between an old thing and a new thing. Question: what causes the similarity?
Common descent.
Common descent. So is common descent something you can introduce into an experiment?
Digging up fossils really isn't an experiment, but that doesn't make it not scientific.
That doesn't answer my question. This is cross-examination. Now, please answer the question.
I'm pointing out the red herring.
A red herring? You said X causes Y, okay? Is it correct that you're saying X equals common descent, Y is similarity between these two things?
I'd have to write that down to keep track of it. What I'm telling you is that the reason the Archaeopteryx transitional form exists is because theropod dinosaurs are the common ancestor of
That's begging the question, dude.
It's not begging the question.
Listen, I'm going to ask you more.
You
need to answer my questions
true?
now.
This is the kind of evidence we would predict.
No,
it was
I'm
found.
not asking for evidence.
Supporting evidence of
Stop
X.
it, Peterson. Stop. This is my cross-examination.
I know.
Observation. We'll do this real slow. Observation. There's an old thing that shares anatomy with a current thing. I ask a question. What causes the similarity? Your hypothesis
it's proposed
is
that common descent causes it. And then we
Got you.
found the evidence that
Let's
causes
keep the interrupting to minimum, please.
Stop it. Okay. You posit that a thing called common descent is the independent variable that causes similar anatomy, correct?
There's no independent variable.
I'm asking a question.
And your question is flawed, which is why I'm informing you that doing paleontology doesn't have independent variables because it's not an experiment.
Therefore, it's not science.
That's complete bullshit.
You can see it. Dude, does a scientific...
There are all kinds of
I'm asking
things.
The questions. I'm
answering your question.
No, you're not. Listen, you just said it. You conceded the debate right now. Why?
No, I didn't. You fucking moron.
Oh,
it
now
doesn't...
He's insulting.
You don't have...
Yeah, Peterson, don't stoop there. Don't stoop there. Just, you need to explain how his questions are nonsensical. And it is true, Jimbob, that if he thinks they're nonsensical, he could be wrong, or that they are nonsensical, especially, that he shouldn't be required to answer the questions. But he should just say, I think your question is nonsensical. Could you rephrase it or explain why he thinks your question is nonsensical? But the effing moron, yeah, Jimbob, he does this in every debate. I think every debate I've seen, he's like, you've conceded. Yeah, he's going to do that. And you should know that by now. I know you guys have interacted before. Just ignore it. Don't stoop to reactionary comments. Stay professional. It really... I know that more than likely people are going to disagree with you. They're going to disagree with both sides. But the minute one side goes low, it bolsters the perception that you're losing to the opponent's side.
No!
Cross-examine.
Hey, guys, let's not... I lowered the volume for a second. Let's not insult each other in the debate. One at a time, please.
Question. Can you develop a scientific theory without an experiment?
Absolutely.
You can. Okay, so what's the need? Why use experiments then if you could just develop theories without experiments?
Because they help.
They help? Okay, so I can just develop any theory without an experiment and you just believe it because I don't have an experiment to be the arbiter of two competing hypotheses.
There's more. You literally started... We're actually doing this earlier. There's other kinds of evidence, like just mere observations, than experimental evidence. But that doesn't mean that it can't be part of science.
Observations is the first step, dude. I didn't say it's not part of science. I said observation is the first step. Now tell me, how do you arbitrate between two competing viable hypotheses without an experiment?
You can look for evidence, like let's say I think that George Washington was actually a woman, and somebody else says, I think he was a man.
That's not a scientific question.
We go and dig up his bones, and we
not
find...
even a scientific theory, dude. Not a scientific theory. We're talking scientific theory.
We're talking about how do you delineate information absent an experiment? It can be done.
I didn't ask that.
I
did not ask if you can gather information. I asked you, can you develop a rigorous scientific theory without the scientific method? Again, I'll read my opener here. Scientific theory is a likely explanation of what causes an observable natural phenomenon based on an experiment using the scientific method. The scientific method goes as such. Observation. Ask a question. What causes Y? Posit that X causes Y. Introduce X, remove X. Repeat. Conclusion. Develop a scientific theory. Now, I've demonstrated that for your quote theory of evolution, when I ask you what's the observation, you say there's this anatomy we found. It looks like this other anatomy we have. Look at the similarities. I ask you, interesting, what causes the similarities? You say common descent. I ask you, can you introduce common descent and remove it? You say no. I say it's not a scientific theory. You say experiments are not necessary for scientific theory. Let's take it down a notch here. Let's say...
What experiments support evolution? Long-term E. coli evolution experiments and guppy studies. So Richard Linsky's long-term E. coli experiment started in 1988, growing 12 lineages of E. coli under identical conditions. Over decades, one of the populations evolved the ability to aerobically metabolize citrate, a nutrient in the growth medium, leading to increased growth. It's the longest running controlled evolution experiment ever conducted and continues to this day. John Endler's guppy experiments. Guppies with less predators have more colorful features. Yeast experiments. Yeast can evolve to become multicellular under selective pressure. Drosophila experiments. Fruit flies. They can evolve postponed aging, demonstrating the role of natural selection in aging. Microbial evolution. Experiments with bacteria have shown they can evolve resistance to antimicrobial peptides and adapt to new environments. Key concepts demonstrated by these experiments: natural selection, adaptation, evolutionary trade-offs, evolutionary constraints. I will agree, I think, with, again, my own uneducated opinion, that common descent, I forget what Peterson says about it, but I think he's using common descent as in the context of the question, it's the wrong answer.
Scurvy is a thing.
Can I address that or not?
No. So scurvy is a symptom, right? A set of symptoms. Scurvy.
I would call it a condition. The symptoms, yeah.
Sure. Okay, great. It's a condition. Is it fair in the scientific method, inside of natural science, to ask the question, what causes scurvy?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Could I arbitrate between two hypotheses of what causes scurvy without an experiment?
It wouldn't necessarily have to be a controlled experiment. You could literally just read ship logs and see, wait a minute, those people on that ship, they took not freeze-dried, but preserved vegetable, fermented cabbage, fermented foods. That was a way to because they didn't have refrigerators, so they could get their dose of vitamin C. Nobody knows what vitamin C is back then, but anyways, you could literally just look at the historical record and you could say, hey, wait a minute, these people were, they had that kind of food, and then this other group of people, all they ate were meat preservatives and crackers and things like that. They got scurvy, and then they didn't. That would be supporting evidence. Now, ideally, you would go on to do experiments that help validate.
Hold on, I understand, Peterson. Yep. Hold on. What you just said is that's an observation, and that's the moment you're actually forming a hypothesis, right? Right. Looks like one ship had oranges and vitamin C and a way to preserve their nutrients, and that ship didn't get scurvy, but this other ship is missing something. That's a question, and I would argue, and I think you would agree, that that's actually where you introduce your hypothesis.
Sure.
Okay, so I'm asking you, again, if you have two competing hypotheses, right? Let's say someone else says that's not the case. Is there any way, other than an experiment, actually arbitrate between the two competing hypotheses?
Yes, because hundreds and hundreds and actually thousands of ships have sailed, and you could look at the records of all of them. You're not producing the data yourself. You're not doing the experiment.
It's an observation.
But if you say yes, but these are observations that confirm what your hypothesis is. If this is literally how studying the past works. Now we can study evolution in the present. But this is a little bit of a tangent, but other scientific theories like the Big Bang, we don't recreate the Big Bang. We do recreate certain conditions to know some things about the first moments of the Big Bang, but literally all of it is just observations. We did the math.
Just data, dude.
We said there should be these predictable things out there in nature that we see, and we found them.
hold on. Can false assumptions accurately predict phenomenon?
Seems reasonable that
Okay.
could happen.
Okay, if two different models or hypotheses are saying, look, I'm observing the data and you're observing the data, I think this is causing the phenomenon that's predictable. They both have a predictable element to them. One is true and one's false, or maybe neither are true, right? I'm asking you, if someone's looking at data of thousands of ships, I don't care if it's 1 million ships, and it looks correlative that the ships that have food preservation technology and vitamin C don't get scurvy, and the ones that don't, they do get scurvy. That's an observation. That's data. I'm asking a different question. When we introduce a hypothesis of what causes the phenomenon, is there any other way to arbitrate between two competing hypotheses than an experiment? Your answer was, yeah, more data. No, you just said more data. So no, the answer is no, because I just told you two people could have the same wealth of data and posit different hypotheses about the cause of the phenomenon, and one could be wrong or both can be wrong. The question is, how do you determine in natural science who's got the correct hypotheses other than an experiment?
Okay, so I just made an entire recording that I didn't turn the record button on for. So anyway, what did I say? I think, see, now I don't remember what I said. I think Peterson should brush up more in defending this. I know Jimbob can be challenging in the way he approaches things. But Peterson, I'm sure, I don't think I could do as well as Peterson did. But I think, I can't remember his opening because I did that this morning. This is 5 p.m. now. I had to go feed some horses. But I think he would have done a better job of explaining how evolution is a theory, and that I don't know if he was already familiar with Jimbob, but how the scientific method isn't a rigorous thing to be followed in order for something to be a scientific theory. And I don't know if he did. I think I said this before. Appeal to the experts. I mean, if the experts say this is a scientific theory and Jimbob disagrees with that, Peterson's burden is less and Jimbob's is higher. I'd say a 90-10%. Once you appeal to the experts in their field, and it's not a fallacy to appeal to experts in their field, that Peterson's burden of proof would be down here and Jimbob's would be up here. So Jimbob has a big hurdle to get over. You just can't introduce these philosophical questions and basically, I don't understand. I mean, in essence, Jimbob's whole argument is an argument from incredulity. He just doesn't understand. I think Jimbob should contact Aaron Ra. I think Aaron Ra would be available. I mean, maybe he's not anymore, but I've seen him talk to people that clearly weren't as educated as him. And for example, he talked to some woman that cracked something on screen and she thought that disproved evolution. And she finally got frustrated and walked off. And Aaron Ra, as far as I recall, he was very calm with her and she just couldn't handle the dissonance. But yeah, I mean, and Jimbob could do a core question. He could do a Google search like I did. He could also Reddit. You often find people that actually have degrees and they will comment. I think there's a website called Biola. I'm not sure of the name, but they are actually Christians or other religious people that also advocate for science. So maybe if I can find that website, I'll put it down in the description. He could go there. He could call, if he has a local university, he could call them. You could email, just start emailing until you get a response from somebody. Or, ask if they don't want to explain, say, if you don't have time to explain it to me, can you refer me to some sources? So yeah, I think it could be done. And I think if he doesn't do that, he's not legitimately interested in understanding how evolution is a scientific theory. Oh, talk origins. I'll try to remember to link that. Jimbob can go there. It explains it, as I did early in the video. But I think that's enough. I hope I gave enough time for Jimbob's cross-examination. I usually try to stay under an hour, but this went longer. So yeah. Have a good day.